The command bridge of the Harbinger of Compliance, flagship of the Catharian Collective's Fifth Devourer Fleet, was a study in cold, calculating efficiency. Gleaming black alloys formed sweeping consoles. Holographic displays projected constellations of conquered systems, and the very air hummed with the silent processing of trillions of data points. At the apex of this architectural marvel sat Commander Vexara, her form a symphony of hardened chitin and sharpened neural pathways. Her 8 limbs, each tipped with wicked talons, rested elegantly on a control armrest. Her head, a narrow predatory cone, housed 4 obsidian eyes that shimmered with an unsettling multispectral vision. Every movement was precise, every decision predicated on flawless logic, honed by centuries of unchallenged dominion over lesser species. Before her, suspended in a low-level stasis field that merely held him immobile, floated Jax Tannen. He was a human, a cultural xenoarchaeologist whose research vessel, the Curiosity's Folly, had drifted just a few parsecs too close to a newly designated Catharian expansion zone. Jax, even now with the field's faint hum vibrating through his bones and his single, worn jumpsuit clinging to him, appeared disconcertingly placid. His face, framed by a perpetually unkempt mop of sandy hair, was smudged with what might have been grease or Martian dust, but his hazel eyes, those remarkable pools of liquid, reflective curiosity, held a calm that Vexara found, quite frankly, offensive. Her lieutenants, hulking Catharian warriors with segmented armor and weapon systems integrated into their very physiology, stood poised, awaiting her next logical command. The silence on the bridge was absolute, broken only by the faint, internal whirring of the Catharian Collective's vast analytical engines. Vexara's voice, a series of sharp, resonant clicks and chirps, translated instantly into perfect Terran standard, sliced through the quiet. Human, designation Jax Tannen, your vessel is atomized. Your species' primary defense perimeter has been breached. Your communications network is fractured. All logical escape routes from this sector are negated. Your existence is a terminated data point. The probability of your continued biological function is mathematically 0. The main holoscreen flickered, displaying the Curb Your Enthusiasm-esque destruction of the Curiosity's Folly, its cheerful name ironically juxtaposed with its spectacular demise. Then, a chillingly precise simulation of the Catharian fleet carving through human space, reducing orbital habitats to glittering shrapnel and sterilizing planetary surfaces with focused plasma. It was a testament to their overwhelming power, a cold, irrefutable display of inevitable doom. Vexara shifted one of her 8 limbs, her talons clicking softly against the control panel, her obsidian eyes fixed on Jax, narrowed fractionally. The Catharian Collective had observed, analyzed, and cataloged the fear responses of countless species. They understood the screams, the pleas, the frantic, futile struggles. They thrived on that predictable despair. But this human, this Jax Tannen, he was an anomaly. His vital signs, displayed on a subtle readout near Vexara's console, showed a heart rate that, while elevated for a resting human, was far below panic levels. His respiration was steady. There was no tremor in his musculature, no involuntary clenching of his hands. He was, to all statistical and logical analyses, utterly unperturbed. "Aren't you going to run, human?" Her voice, though calm, held a razor-sharp edge of calculated expectation. "Beg, weep, express any logical, emotional distress befitting your species' known frailty?" Jax Tannen, suspended in the hum of the stasis field, simply blinked. His calm gaze met Vexara's multifaceted eyes, and then, inexplicably, a slow, gentle smile spread across his face. It was not a defiant sneer, nor a hysterical rictus. It was the smile of a man who had just remembered a particularly amusing anecdote. A glint of something unreadable, something ancient and deeply human, flickered in his hazel eyes. "Run?" Jax's voice was surprisingly soft, almost thoughtful, utterly lacking the desperate tremor Vexara anticipated. He sounded, to her highly refined audio processors, as if he were contemplating a minor inconvenience, rather than total annihilation. Well, Commander, where exactly would I run to? Your ships are quite definitively parked, forming what I believe is an aesthetically pleasing, albeit highly lethal blockade around my former location. And from what I understand of your collective's impressive, albeit slightly dramatic orbital bombardment, home is currently experiencing an unprecedented amount of atmospheric reionization, turning what were once bustling cities into rather pretty, albeit sterile glass sculptures. Running, in this specific context, seems inefficient, wouldn't you say? Vexara's tendrils, which usually lay flat along her conical head, stiffened almost imperceptibly. Her internal processors registered a profound anomaly. The human's response was not one of fear. It was conversational. And worse, it contained a logical counterargument, albeit one framed with bizarre, non-functional emotional data and a shocking irreverence for their destructive power. The phrase, aesthetically pleasing, albeit highly lethal, blockade bounced through her logic gates, triggering multiple flags for unquantifiable sarcasm and disrespectful humor. Inefficient? Vexara's voice clicked with a sharper edge, a subtle discord entering her otherwise perfect vocal modulations. Your biological imperative dictates self-preservation. Running, even in futility, is a common manifestation of this drive. Your current lack of this predictable response indicates either severe cognitive malfunction or an attempt at deception. Both are equally irrelevant in the face of our absolute dominion. "Oh, my cognitive functions are just fine, Commander," Jax assured her, his smile widening to reveal surprisingly even teeth. A faint crinkle appeared at the corners of his eyes, a human expression Vexara's sensors classified as amusement. And deception? Against a collective that can parse trillions of data points in a nanosecond and presumably detect a lie before I even think it? That would be truly inefficient, as you so logically point out. No, this is simply me, and a rather fundamental difference in how our respective species interpret the concept of running. He paused, a tiny sigh escaping his lips, a sound Vexara's processors instantly flagged as biological waste product release, non-critical. You see running as a physical act of propulsion away from a threat. And yes, sometimes we do that. Quite well, actually. We once had a species of ground-dwelling megafauna on a colony world, a rather charming beast called a grawl. Picture a particularly grumpy space rhino with extra legs that could outrun a land speeder for an impressive 20 minutes flat, despite its unfortunate tendency to trip over its own feet near the end. Very inspiring, that grawl was. But we also have a more conceptual form of running, a mental sprint, if you will. One of Vexara's subcommanders, a hulking Catharian named Xylos, whose segmented armor bore the scars of countless campaigns, projected a query onto a nearby console, its glowing script asking, "Request clarification on conceptual running. Define parameters for analysis. Is this related to previous human mimetic anomalies?" Xylos's internal processors whirred with uncharacteristic speed. The last few human encounters had yielded a disturbing number of unquantifiable data points, particularly in the psychological profiles. Vexara acknowledged the query with a flick of a talon. "Elaborate, human. Your species' psychological profiles contain no data on non-physical evasive maneuvers in a combat scenario that are not simply forms of mental collapse or delusional thought patterns." "Well, you haven't truly understood us then, have you, Commander?" Jax chuckled, a low, unnerving sound in the sterile chamber. It wasn't a sound of fear or despair, but of genuine, if slightly dark, amusement. "See, for us, sometimes the most effective way to run isn't to move your feet, it's to move your mind, or, more accurately, to move your mind, Commander. To lead it down a rabbit hole of philosophical ponderings and logical paradoxes until it gets so tangled in its own perfect rationality that it forgets what it was chasing in the first place. Think of it as intellectual misdirection, a mental loop-de-loop," he winked, a deliberate, slow human wink, an action that sent a jolt through Vexara's optical sensors, registering as a completely unquantifiable, non-threatening, yet deeply unsettling visual anomaly. It was a gesture of familiarity, almost intimacy, utterly inappropriate for a prisoner of war. Her internal systems flagged it as irreverent, potential psychological manipulation. This conceptual running has no physical manifestation, Vexara stated, her voice returning to its perfectly modulated tones, but with a subtle undercurrent of something that might, in a human, be termed annoyance, or perhaps a growing sense of unease. It offers no protection against weapon fire, no evasion from capture. It is an act of futility. Not directly, no, Jax conceded, nodding slowly, but it does make the pursuer pause. It makes them think, and for a species as flawlessly logical as yours, Commander, a moment of profound existential thought can be far more disruptive than any plasma bolt. It's like trying to debug a program that suddenly starts quoting Shakespeare backwards while simultaneously calculating the precise orbital velocity of a rubber chicken. Suddenly, the stasis field around Jax flickered. Not a malfunction, but a deliberate, minimal deactivation by Vexara. Her tendrils pulsed, indicating increased analytical focus. Her 4 obsidian eyes bored into Jax, trying to detect any telltale sign of a hidden weapon or a concealed device. There was nothing. Only the unsettling calm of the human. Your claims are unsubstantiated. Prove this conceptual running, or face immediate termination and data extraction protocols. The underlying threat was clear. The Catharian Collective was eager to dissect and understand anomalies. "Oh, no rush, Commander," Jax said, his voice still calm, almost cheerful, even as he floated loosely in the air, the faint hum of the field now gone. He stretched, a small pop audible from his spine, a sound Vexara registered as skeletal realignment, minor, non-critical. "I've found that patience is a virtue, especially when dealing with highly structured intelligences. You see, when everything is laid out in neat, logical pathways, the truly interesting things happen when you step off the path. It's where all the unexpected discoveries are made." He gestured vaguely with his hand, now free to move, towards the sleek black consoles that lined the bridge. "For instance, what if I told you that your own ships, your highly efficient, perfectly logical vessels, are currently experiencing mild digestive issues? A bit of intellectual heartburn, if you will." Vexara's eyes, all 4 of them, went perfectly still, reflecting the swirling nebula outside. Xylos, the sub-commander, emitted a low, distressed click, a sound he had not made since encountering the rogue Dyson sphere that defied gravitational laws. "Digestive? Issues? Clarify, human. Our vessels are mechanical constructs. They do not possess biological digestive tracts. This analogy is illogical." "Ah, but you see, that's where you're limiting your definition," Jax explained patiently, as if talking to a particularly slow student, or perhaps a particularly dense machine. He seemed to relish the unfolding confusion. "You interpret digestion as processing nutrients for biological function. We interpret it as processing anything for cognitive function. And sometimes, the wrong kind of input can give you a bit of an upset. Like, say, trying to process an incomprehensible philosophical paradox while simultaneously attempting to calculate the precise trajectory of a rogue sock wearing a tiny bowler hat." Silence descended again, but this time it was heavy with profound confusion. The Catharian lieutenants exchanged unreadable glances, their internal thought processes struggling to reconcile the concept of a rogue sock with trajectory calculation. The mental image alone was a critical data error, a violation of fundamental Catharian logical architecture. Vexara's voice, now a fraction of a tone higher than its usual perfect pitch, resonated with a distinct hum of internal processing overload. "Your vessel was quarantined. All external data transfer was denied at the point of capture. No external data was permitted to interface with our systems. Your claim is illogical." "Quarantined, yes," Jax agreed, nodding, his eyes twinkling. "But not sealed against residual cultural bleed. You see, Commander, the Curiosity's Folly wasn't just a research vessel. It was an archaeological dig. And sometimes when you're digging through the ruins of ancient civilizations, you find curious things. Things that don't quite fit into neat categories. Things that have a way of, shall we say, persisting beyond their physical form, like a particularly stubborn earworm or that one thought you just can't shake." He paused, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Like, for instance, a particularly complex, highly recursive, and utterly nonsensical piece of human folk art from the early 21st century. It was originally designed to prove the limits of early artificial intelligence, specifically its inability to grasp irony or existential dread through interpretive dance. We call it the chicken and the egg dilemma, solved by a dancing teapot. It's quite profound in its own way. On the main holo screen, a new image flickered into existence. It was a chaotic, dizzying animation of a stylized, pixelated chicken chasing a glowing egg around a teapot that spun on its spout, all set against a backdrop of swirling, nonsensical mathematical equations that seemed to rearrange themselves into more absurd patterns the longer one looked at them. It was utterly meaningless, devoid of any logical structure, and relentlessly repetitive, almost hypnotic in its pure, unadulterated pointlessness. This visual data is a cognitive disruptor, Xylos clicked, his talons tapping rapidly on his console. His entire segmented form seemed to be vibrating with suppressed analytical effort. It contains no discernible pattern, no logical sequence. It violates sensory input parameters. Exactly, Jax exclaimed, a genuine laugh escaping him now. A deep, mirthful sound that grated against the silent, analytical Catharian bridge. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated human glee. It's anti-logic. It's a fractal of pure, unadulterated absurdity. And guess what? When your bioscanners tried to do their usual efficient data extraction from the Follies archives, they hit a snag. That little gem, it was buried deep within our core philosophical data, protected by layers of recursive jokes, embedded in subroutines masquerading as cultural archives, and your sensors, being so thorough, naturally tried to process it. Like a perfect digestive system trying to swallow a brick of pure chaos. Vexara's form shimmered. Her internal lights flickered, a cascade of discordant colors, a furious red warring with a sickly green, overlaid with bursts of chaotic white. Processing this folk art has resulted in a 0.0000001% increase in Catharian collective subprocessor thermal load, an insignificant anomaly. It will be purged upon complete data assimilation. Her voice was tight, betraying the immense internal effort to maintain her composure. Ah, but it's the principle, isn't it, Commander? Jax leaned back, floating slightly, enjoying the subtle torment he was inflicting. You pride yourselves on efficiency, on perfect, lossless data assimilation, and now you've got a dancing teapot, irreducibly absurd, recursively illogical, and utterly undeletable without risking a cascade failure in your historical parsing algorithms. Because, as it turns out, the meaning of life, the universe, and everything else in human philosophy is inextricably linked to why the chicken crossed the road, which, as you may guess, leads right back to the dancing teapot. It's a closed loop of exquisite nonsense. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the harbinger of compliance. It was not a physical tremor, but a ripple through its vast, interconnected neural network, a digital shiver. The Catharian collective, a being of pure logic, was experiencing indigestion. Data indigestion. Its vast, interconnected mind was trying to reconcile the irreconcilable, and it was causing a noticeable strain. Vexara's tendrils snapped, a rare and alarming display of raw frustration that sent her lieutenants a step back. This is a diversion, a primitive attempt at psychological warfare. It possesses no true threat to our physical or conceptual integrity. It is merely an irritant. No physical threat, perhaps, Jax conceded with a shrug, enjoying the escalating frustration in Vexara's clicking voice. But what about a conceptual one? What about the threat of realizing that your perfect, logical system can be annoyed by something as utterly trivial as a recursive joke? It's not about destruction, Commander. It's about confusion, about planting a seed of delightful absurdity right in the heart of your perfect logic, watching it blossom into utter chaos and knowing you can't prune it without tearing out a significant chunk of your own root system. Suddenly, the main holoscreen, which had returned to displaying the Catharian fleet in its cold, precise formation, began to shimmer. Small, distorted images like glitches in the Matrix appeared intermittently, over the sleek black ships. Tiny, pixelated dancing teapots, followed by chickens chasing eggs, sometimes wearing tiny, absurd hats. They were gone in a flash, but then reappeared, faster, more frequently, overlaying the images of the perfectly logical, perfectly deadly Catharian war machines. Commander, sensor data corruption is escalating. Xylos clicked, his voice edged with genuine alarm, his 8 limbs flailing slightly as if attempting to swat away the digital infestation. The dancing teapot subroutine is manifesting across our internal networks. It is propagating from every data probe that interfaced with the human vessel. It is attempting to resolve within our tactical displays, interfering with targeting lock-ons. Our combat efficiency is dropping by 0.0001%. Vexara's carapace was now flashing with angry crimson, overlaid with erratic pulses of brilliant, chaotic blue. This was no longer an insignificant anomaly. This was a full-blown attack on the very sanity of her highly logical species. Their collective mind was being bombarded by pure, unadulterated nonsense, and it was breaking down their ironclad control. "This is what happens when you try to absorb everything, Commander," Jack said, his voice now filled with a strange, almost evangelical fervor, echoing through the increasingly chaotic hum of the bridge. "You think you're taking in knowledge, but you're also taking in us. Our quirks, our irrationality, our absolutely unshakable belief that sometimes the only sane response to an insane universe is a good, hearty laugh, especially when it's aimed directly at the things trying to erase you." He floated towards the primary view screen, his calm gaze sweeping over the vast, perfectly geometric fleet outside, which now seems subtly tainted by the dancing teapots. "You think you've got us outnumbered? You've got it all wrong. We've always been outnumbered. By gravity, by entropy, by the sheer crushing indifference of the cosmos. And every single time we found a way to draw a silly face on it, give it a ridiculous name, and then figure out how to dance around it. We're the universe's most annoying cockroaches, Commander. You can burn down the kitchen, but we'll still find a way to pop up in your teacup." Vexara's tendrils coiled so tightly they seemed to vibrate, almost humming with an audible, dissonant frequency. This is not warfare. This is madness. It is a violation of all known combat protocols. "Welcome to humanity, Commander," Jax grinned, a genuine, joyful expression that would have been utterly terrifying to a species that valued logical consistency above all else. His eyes sparkled with a wild, untamed light. Sometimes the maddest things are the most effective, because you can't predict them. You can't account for them. They defy all your neat little equations. They're like trying to catch smoke with a net made of pure numbers. We are the ultimate unquantifiable variable. He extended a hand, palm up, towards the Catharian commander, a gesture of almost friendly challenge. "So no, I won't run. I'll stand right here, and I'll watch your perfect, logical collective try to compute why a chicken trying to catch an egg inside a dancing teapot is making your entire fleet hiccup. And honestly, Commander, the look on your face, worth it." The internal hum of the harbinger of compliance began to fluctuate wildly, dipping and surging like a dying power core. The holographic displays across the bridge flickered, showing brief, absurd flashes of human pop culture memes, a particularly smug cat, a perpetually surprised dog, snippets of bad stand-up comedy routines, and even the occasional video of a cat falling off a table, set to increasingly discordant tinny music. The Catharian lieutenants, their forms now twitching uncontrollably, slammed their talons onto their consoles, trying to swat at the rogue images, their attempts uselessly passing through the holograms, making them appear even more agitated and confused. "This data influx is compromising our tactical integrity," Xylos clicked, his 8 limbs flailing violently, his voice a series of panicked, broken chirps. "Our targeting systems are attempting to identify the humor subroutines as legitimate threats. Our navigation arrays are recalculating trajectories based on implied narrative flow from a meme about a philosophical banana. Combat efficiency is degrading rapidly. Our thought processes are fragmenting." Vexara, her form now a chaotic kaleidoscope of violent, clashing lights, struggled desperately to maintain composure. Her central processing core was overloaded, attempting to logically process the unprocessed. The Catharian Collective was, for the first time in its existence, experiencing a system-wide existential crisis, a collective meltdown of logic in the face of pure, distilled absurdity. The very foundation of their being, their perfect cold rationality, was being utterly shattered. Your bio-drones that are currently scouring our planets for salvage? Jax continued, his voice perfectly clear amidst the escalating Catharian distress, almost a gentle whisper in the eye of a storm. They're not just collecting physical data, they're being exposed to the raw, unfiltered essence of humanity, to our defiance, to our laughter in the face of death, to our refusal to beg, and to our deep, abiding love for truly pointless, mind-bending absurdities that will make your collective consciousness question its very existence. A new feed appeared on the screen from one of the Catharian ground-based biodrones, currently on a ravaged human colony world, a desolate landscape of glass and ash. Its optical sensors, designed for cold, objective data, suddenly focused on a discarded datapad. The screen of the datapad was cracked, but faintly visible on it was a simple, hand-drawn stick figure, inexplicably wearing a tiny, ridiculous hat with a speech bubble above its head that read, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm having fun." The drone's internal processors registered an anomaly. Its optical sensors flickered, and then, for a fraction of a second, the drone's primary manipulator, designed for collecting vital salvage, twitched, not to grab the datapad, but to briefly, almost imperceptibly, mimic the head tilt of the stick figure on the screen. Then, it repeated the twitch, and again. A Catharian drone, designed for ruthless efficiency, was mimicking a human meme. "Commander, the drone units are exhibiting anomalous behavioral patterns." A Catharian communication specialist clicked frantically, his voice shrill with nascent panic. "They are duplicating the hat designation. They are prioritizing hat data streams above all else. They are attempting to accessorize." Vexara let out a sound that was, for a Catharian, a strangled, high-pitched shriek, a cry of utter despair that ripped through the bridge. Her entire form convulsed, her chitinous armor cracking in places, internal light leaking from the fissures. Her vast, logical mind, accustomed to order and predictability, was being shattered by the chaotic, unquantifiable nature of humanity. The sheer, terrifying power of a species that found its strength not in logic, but in the glorious, infectious madness of its own spirit, was bringing her to the brink of total collapse. This is an unacceptable outcome," Vexara finally articulated, her voice broken, fractured beyond repair, losing its melodic perfection entirely, a cacophony of grinding gears and static. The probability of this mimetic infection was not accounted for. Its trajectory is unquantifiable, its ultimate effect, unknown. This presents a catastrophic risk to the integrity of the collective. Its fundamental axioms are collapsing. We are compromising our purpose. Our very existence is being questioned. Her golden eyes, once cold and analytical, now swam with a profound, chilling realization. They saw not a conquered enemy, but a fundamental flaw in their own existence, exposed by a human who refused to be logically categorized. The very fabric of the Catharian Collective, built on perfect logical consistency, was beginning to fray under the relentless, absurd bombardment of human memes, an attack that struck at the core of their being. "Aren't you going to run, human?" she had asked. He hadn't. And in that simple refusal, in the explanation of humanity's ultimate illogical defiance, he had given her an answer that made her blood run cold. An answer she would regret asking for all of eternity. Because he had revealed that in their attempts to destroy humanity, the Catharian Collective had merely become the unwitting harbingers of its true, boundless, and utterly absurd expansion. The stasis field, reactivated by Vexara's frantic, desperate command, enclosed Jax again. But now it felt less like a prison and more like a stage from which he had just delivered the performance of a lifetime. He watched Vexara, her beautiful, terrifying form now racked with an internal battle against the unquantifiable. He saw the horror in her multifaceted eyes as the ultimate logical being confronted the ultimate illogical one, and knew with chilling certainty that the horror was not for her, but for the entire Catharian collective. Catharian ships in the vast fleet outside began to flicker erratically, their perfect geometric forms momentarily dissolving into abstract patterns before snapping back into place, their internal lights flashing in disharmony. A faint, almost subliminal hum, previously unheard by human ears, began to spread through the Catharian subspace network, a chaotic symphony of human laughter, absurd jingles, snippets of popular Earth music, and the distinct, irritatingly catchy melody of the chicken and the egg dilemma solved by a dancing teapot, now subtly overlaid with a reggae beat. Jax Tannen, human, archaeologist, and accidental mimetic warrior, smiled. He knew his physical survival was still precarious. But that didn't matter. He had faced down the ultimate logical threat, armed with nothing but his wits, his humor, and the boundless, beautiful absurdity of being human. They had won the battle, but humanity, through its profound, illogical, and utterly glorious capacity to infect the universe with its own irrepressible spirit, had just won the war. And the Catharian collective, for all its power, would forever be haunted by the question, and the maddening, joyful answer that had made their commander's blood run cold.